All right. Welcome, fellow Spellbreakers, to another edition of the Spellbreakers podcast. Thank you for all of your support so far. Please like and subscribe if you can. That helps a lot. Today we are very blessed and welcomed to accept back with open arms Howdie, Mickoski. If you haven't checked out our previous interviews, please do it again. They were phenomenal, and we are excited to continue the conversations here around Howdie's new works. For those of you who don't know, Howdie is a 21st century philosopher, researcher in the areas of simulation theory, history, self-observation, and ancient wisdom. He began his life as a stand-up comedian and hockey coach, but he began to study ancient civilizations of Egypt and Mexico in 1997. This led to the study of Zen, native Indian medicine, alchemy, Gnosticism, and comparative religions and spirituality. This then led to The Power of Then. He has written many books, all of which you should buy right now and check out. But we will be discussing mostly his recent book, which is, I believe, available now. Correct, Howdie?
Yeah, it came out like about 5 months ago.
Okay. So go get that now. It's called Empty the Cave, Awaken the Spark. Howdie, welcome back to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm okay, and thanks. You probably could have just said as an intro, here's the guy who did some stuff.
Well, we want to come correct, and we really appreciate you having on. In fact, they've been some of our more most popular podcasts, and with that, I get actually a lot of hate from people as well who say that I'm either too black-pilled or I don't talk enough about the trappings or the soul trap, and feels like you actually can't make anybody happy. And I even got shamed for having a kid because I was having a being in this harsh world. So yeah, I found our podcast very enlightening, but also very polarizing with respect to
Hmm.
some of the comments. But yeah,
Hmm.
I do appreciate you giving
Hmm.
me portions of your book. I definitely need to finish it. But I want to start with my first impressions were just that it is a little bit of a change of tone for you in terms of how we're describing the nature of reality. It's less like a prison and more nuance. So maybe we could start there about how your positions have either changed or we're just refining them in this book.
Yeah, I guess the best way, positions haven't really changed, but when I wrote Exit the Cave, when that book came in, it was in 2022, which of course came out of Falling for Truth, and I felt like I was going to that one edge of material. Now, this was the hard part for me to really understand is that there are two completely opposite pathways of understanding that moves to the totality of what you might call complete knowing. One side of that is the knowledge of what we'll call the matrix or the cave or a type of trapping reality, and the other is complete self-definition through the realization of emptiness, through the understanding of what emptiness is. And the first one, when Exit the Cave came out, I didn't think it was going to be easy enough to present both at the same time. And it seemed like a really good presentation of the matrix trapping side of it was more required. It was beginning to be more spoken about at that time. I mean, it's been around for 40 or 50 years, or of course, thousands of years. But I thought it kind of could have used a little bit better synthesis and a little better packaging of presentation. So that's what Exit the Cave was. When I felt it was time to come to this book, Empty the Cave, it was time to bring in the understandings of emptiness and the understandings of the work of self-definition. And so because of that, now we have to soften a little bit because it is a prison reality. And it's a giant, I even changed the name from a suffering pit of hell to a suffering pit of distortion or something like that. Just because I want to make the seeing of this reality a little more encompassing than just where we were at Exit the Cave. We needed Exit the Cave to kind of begin, what's that biblical phrase? Separate the wheat from the chaff, kind of. We had to kind of know who's interested, who actually wants to go forward with this material and who doesn't. So that was like a dividing line of like, okay, those who looked into this stuff, read my book, weren't interested. Okay, that's fine. But that was to sort of start separating who is the possibilities of the group that, okay, now they're going to go to empty the cave. And that was kind of the progression. And there is a progression to potentially a third book if I'm still alive to write it.
Yes. Yeah, very well said. But yeah, I guess taking it from a suffering pit of hell to distortion, I mean, I think
It is still suffering. It's just that suffering is the easiest of the distortions to see. It's the most obvious because it's the most felt by the material body and the mental body. But that doesn't mean it's the only distortion. And when you start to realize that everything in this realm on all levels is a distortion, a lie, an upside down twist, it's actually, it seems like I'm simplifying, but I'm actually making it much more complex because now you've got to see everything even more than just the suffering, which is obvious.
Mhm. Yeah, and I do like a lot of your clarifications, and it's clear you've been really. This really is a culmination of your work. You can see Falling for Truth in there, of course, Exit the Cave, book one. I just really like how deep we're going in this material. Yeah, I mean, when we're diving more into the nature of reality, right, you're talking about that distortion within the matrix, right? It's like, it's almost like a choose your adventure AI simulacra is the way it's just right, it's defined in the book here, right? And with the goal still being to harvest or perpetuate suffering, but in a way it does seem, maybe I'm reading in between the lines, but it almost felt like it was, the way you're describing is almost like a self-sustaining trap within itself. Like it's trapping you as long as it's self-perpetuated by us, right? You're describing it less as an external thing that we're being foisted into, and more that we are an inherent part of maintaining that matrix or that trap.
It's both. And that's why this is starting to get challenging material. It was challenging to write and put this book together. Most of those chapters were rewritten 15 or 20 times, and I could have rewritten them maybe another 15 or 20 times, but I got to a point where I said, I think this is okay. I think this is understandable. Um, the challenge is how one views reality and how one views their life and how one views what they're going through. Now, the first book, one of the key elements of that first book was to start to get people out of that new age idea of you create your reality. So everything that happens is all your responsibility. So if something horrible happened to you when you were 4 years old, well, that's your fault, either for some whatever, some karma, and that book was trying to recognize that no, the matrix is a built-in suffering place. And what its job is to create specific suffering for specific people, most of it beyond our person, because we wouldn't choose that. We wouldn't choose a lot of the garbage that's happened in our lives or to others that we know. But as you start going deeper into it and using things like The Good Place as an example, the TV show The Good Place in the second chapter that I write about, when you begin to see that what we are choosing our life, you might say, or our reality to a point. The matrix gives us like 10,000 possible choices, and it seems like a lot. There's 10,000 possibilities of, well, I could go here, I could go here, I could do this, I could marry this person, I could marry that person, I can have this job, okay. And there's a massive amount of choice, and we are choosing elements of, but it's a set package. That's the problem. The matrix it's like the matrix has said, I'm giving you breakfast, but you get your choice of cereal or eggs. What do you want? You don't get the chance to say, well, actually, I don't want either of those things. I think I'll have something else. No, this is your choice. And that's one of the things we have to learn from the character, right? The thing that's being played in the dream, the Donnie thing, the Howdy thing, is that we don't have a multitude of choices. We don't have billions of possibilities, but we've got 10,000. So we're learning, we're still being a robot, so to speak, but we're starting to navigate to the stream. I'll call that to the energy stream or the transmission stream that gives us not the most comfortable life or not the most happy life. That's if you're really looking to the depth of work, that's not what you're looking for. You're looking for which of the 10,000 is the one that gives the best opportunity for eventually exiting the matrix, which is the life that is the most sort of off the chart normal almost from all the other possibilities. That's the one that will put the doorways in place where there's the possibility of literally um, shattering the shattering the walls that are, like you say, it's a combination of we're only kept here because the walls are so strong, and breaking down those walls is what the work is about. And breaking those walls is not a lot of fun because it means you're breaking down all of your deepest held beliefs, fears, and most importantly, hopes.
Yeah, very well put. Yeah, I'm working on my own kind of model of reality in the Matrix, and it was very interesting to see so many of the parallels. And there's so many layers to this, which I think you've been on a journey with, and you're pulling your readers on this journey as well, right? We go a layer deep, and we kind of start to realize our world leaders and the power structures aren't really what we think they are. You know, the concept of democracy and all of this is kind of bunk. Then we go into history and we realize, hey, a lot of this isn't really real. We go even further, we're seeing experiences of alien abductions, archontic forces, right? Then we're seeing past life trickery. It goes on and on and on. And so, I would be curious to just get a good understanding of your vision for how you think this matrix reality works. Do you think ultimately that the people we are seeing, the world leaders, the people manipulating history, are these thought forms? Are these like as a result of us being in the matrix? Is there a co-creation element, or are these actually independent beings that are pushing us somehow into this system? I would love to just really hash out your vision for how you see the matrix in its totality.
Simple answer, it just doesn't exist.
Right.
Now that's not going to take the conversation very far, but that's the deepest answer. Like if I'm talking from the deepest from if I'm talking from the divine spark, then it's oh yeah, it's all one giant holographic projection. That's all it is. That the character has learned to constantly believe is real. That's that's the switch point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, once you're in dealing in the false, so when you're in now you're in when you're in the video game and you want to talk about the video game, and I mean it's that I mean that's a fair answer. It's not real. Okay. But it operates like it is real when you're in it, right? Like if we get hit by a stone, someone throws a stone at us, it's going to hurt. Wherever we got hit, the body will feel pain. So it's struck, and this is so difficult to try to say how it's structured. This is an opinion, I guess, of how I would say that the structuring of it is all, first of all, it's all AI. So what we know of as AI in our world is really just tapping into is humans learning how to tap in a material way to a force that already exists. So it's not like AI is being created by a bunch of programmers in a computer. AI is literally, you could almost say it's almost a demiurge, or the demiurge's first thing that the demiurge did was generate an AI so that the AI could run the creation for it. Simplify. So first of all, it's all AI. So it's all run through codes, programs, metaphorically, codes, programs, and it continues to clone itself, copy itself, expand itself. So when we talk about, oh, the demiurge created archons, well, through the AI, the demiurge would have created, and it depends which text you read, but let's say it created seven. So you create seven sort of semi copies of itself, and those seven created like two copies of themselves. And so that's kind of what's happening. So you're seeing a sort of a copying nature going on and on, deeper and deeper and deeper, bigger and bigger and bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Once it got to the material stage, once it got to the what we know of as this particular realm, originally this realm seemed to have been kind of left alone for quite a long time. But humans and animals and trees and rocks kind of did their own thing. Um, and either too many beings were figuring this reality out. They were figuring it out and they were able to leave, or they were building structures, for example, early pyramids that might have been conducive to opening doorways to again open the matrix or shut the ability of the AI to work and whatever. So it seems like the next step was to drop um, control entities into the material part of the matrix with the job of creating a type of self hypnosis, a type of self hypnosis would be the best way of describing it, where you create they don't actually create the reality that we're experiencing now. Like the reality we're experiencing is even not the real material reality. Like that's what's so difficult. There's what the material realm is supposed to be, and then we're living in a theater placed on top of it of the physical reality that's supposed to be here. And once in a while, the real one blends through. So it's really confusing to even try to deal with reality. And what's happening is we we help generate some of the reality through the subconscious mind. And so that's what they're doing. They don't need to project the reality. They just need to get enough humans to believe the reality or to believe the idea that they want or have the emotions that they want and then project those emotions. If you really study your thought, and I'll shut up here and let you talk. If you really study your thought closely, you'll notice that the majority of your thought is actually a projection.
Mm.
That what's bizarre is you don't if you experience a tree, you have an experience before there's a tree, before there's a manifest of a tree. There's an experience of perception, and then literally what we know of as the physical form, our eyes, because our eyes again are not built. If you study our eyes, they're not built to bring things in. They're built to project out. And literally, all our senses are what we know of as our senses. Our senses are projecting the tree. So our senses create the tree, but something on a deeper level has interacted with some energetic field on some energetic dimension that has put the idea in of I'm coming across a birch tree. And so it's a very strange dynamic that how our realities even programmed. So these things that you're describing, they've put themselves into position to generate on a more energetic level the kind of projections that they want the human beings to project into this realm. That's my very complex answer to an ultra complex question.
No, it was, yeah, very well said. And I have come to the conclusion on my own that it is a non-human force, and it does feel largely automated at all levels in
Mm-hmm.
the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say specifically in the politics, social media sphere, which sucks a lot of loosh in itself these days.
Mm-hmm.
I just see this constant. readjusting almost in real time to the let's call it awakening stages of people, right? The more people become aware of something, out comes the newest version of politician who's telling you, truth you've never seen before, which inspires so many people to say we're in this golden era of awakening. But if you see, at the same time, they're always maintaining the status quo. So as much as people think there is inherent instability in the system, it seems like the AIs or controllers, wherever they are, their goal is to maintain stability at all costs, right? So when people start to wake up to one truth or one evil, something that had been totally never to be discussed, right? All of a sudden, we are seeing all these people awakening to a truth. And then, enter stage left, the new politician or person who kind of keeps you on the plantation, right? So to me, that really seems like a large part of the process of trapping people in endless layers of the onion, so that you find one truth and then there's the next person there to tell you, yes, like that is, that's the end stage. Like you've made it to the final boss, but it seems like it's a trap forever, right?
Right. It's the cave is endless. The cave is endless. And you could probably study it for a billion lifetimes and probably still not completely reach the totality of all possibility and understanding within the cave. I feel that there's a level of research required, there's a level of understanding required, there's a certain level of seeing through lies. And there's generally two problems. One, somebody sees through one lie, say one big lie. If you think of it like a series of Russian dolls, one inside of the other. Okay, they find the one Russian doll, and now they spend the rest of their life studying it, talking about it, writing about it. They put all their effort into that one layer and never start to wait a minute. I've got to go to the next layer. I've got to go to the next layer. I've got to go to the next layer. Like I studied ancient Egypt for 8 years, 10 years almost, ancient Egypt. And I'm literally have not talking about it in 10 years. Because you've got to move to another level. You've got to keep going. Once you find something and you find out it's a lie, you don't need to know more about the lie. You don't need to know the details of the lie. You just, okay, it's a lie. What's next? What else do I think is true? And so that's the process. You have to keep going. But there becomes a certain point where one has to realize it doesn't matter what I study externally, it will all be a lie. It will all be false. It will all be a distortion. So at a certain point, someone has to make the switch to say, where can I look for the thing that might be true? And that's now turning 180 degrees to look within. And when we mean within, I'm sure we've talked about this in our other discussions, but within does not mean people think it means, oh, I'll start going inside my skin, that the skin is like the dividing line of outside. And so I'll go inside and I'll start watching my thoughts and my feelings. And yes, that's a step one of the process, is beginning to get to understand what is a thought, what is a feeling, where does it come from, who is the thing that's observing it. But the big explosive moment comes when there's a step back from that and something realizes all of those things are actually outside of an observing self. So to go within doesn't mean to go within the body. Spiraling inward refers to going into the self, the big S self, which is then to see that everything that can be labeled with a word of any kind of description is external. So that's all outside of this anterior self. That's when a big change happens, and that's what almost nobody does. Mm-hmm. They might say they do it. Like I say, they might watch their thoughts a bit, and they sit in some meditations, and they have some stillness, but going into the self means you have to recognize, start to examine that You mean all of those things I labeled myself by, all of the identities I labeled myself by, those all might be false. That's a terrifying thing to the egoic structure, to the identity. So the identity prefers to play in a field that's safe. And that's kind of what you're describing. It's this idea of this constant that the dream, the matrix itself, because remember, the matrix can see all. The matrix is Santa Claus. It's Satan, right? It's Satan's claws. It sees everything. It knows if you're naughty or nice all the time. It knows if the sheep is starting to get close to the fence. And it also knows what's the thing that that particular sheep would be a good distraction for it to come back in. Is it a temptation? Some will get tempted. Some will get tempted with that. Some will get, it'll be something fearful. Something bad will happen in their life, or something catastrophic that they have to all of a sudden turn around. And if you start looking into your life and looking into your past, that what seem to be like almost key moments, like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm starting to make progress. I'm starting to go on. What happened next? What was the next thing? Did somebody offer you out of the way a new job? Did somebody did some girl walk in off the street and, oh, wow, I started dating this person? Or did the opposite happen? Did all of a sudden you get in a car accident? Did your company that you work for all of a sudden shut down and now you had no job and you had to focus on that? If you watch closely, you'll see that the matrix is an expert at screwing with your life at really key moments. Even when it looks like it's giving you something great, it's giving you some sort of fabulous synchronicity. The synchronicity is again designed to pull you away from the only that one pathway it does not want you to go. The matrix doesn't care if you're on pathway 9,999, you've got all of those. It doesn't care. But pathway 10,000, the matrix does not want you on that one, because then there's a possibility that you, as a divine spark, might exit the matrix. It does not want that. So, because if every time a divine spark leaves, there's one less power source here. One less power source means it's harder for the matrix to run. And if the matrix dies, the archons die. That means all of the things that we would classify as AI controllers, as whatever you want to call all of these beings on all levels, they all, in a sense, cease to exist if the matrix ceases to. So you say it's continuous. What they're doing is continuous, or keeping things going. Yes, their underlying job is the matrix has to continue, because if the matrix ends, they end. It makes sense what's going on when you understand it in those terms, and it doesn't make me like them anymore, but it allows me to understand their motivation for how they operate.
Yeah, and in your book, um, there's a lot more emphasis on the nature of self and the concept of self that I think would be good to dive into. When you kind of summed up your book saying the Matrix doesn't exist, um, I think you're correct there. But why does it continue to exist? And it is in our minds, and moreover, it's based off our identity and identification with false self. I'll give you an example that stood out to me from reading your book, is that every morning, if you're conscious, if you wake up consciously, there's a period of time where you are just awareness. There's nothing else. You're just aware of you're observing, you're aware. And then every morning there's almost a download of who I am, what my worries are for the day, what, all of the things that could go wrong. And to me, it actually feels, the more I'm present with it, it feels almost externally inputted, right? Like my true nature is
Mm.
that awareness, or that being, that observing force. And then all of a sudden it's like this download, like, no, you're this little thing and you got to be this. And, all of your petty troubles and worries and tasks and stuff for the day then get just kind of downloaded, and that can kind of pull you into unconsciousness or that autopilot for the day. And I'm curious if you're experiencing this as well, and how do you relate that to the this your concept of self.
Everybody can do that test, what Donnie just described there. If you're really aware, when you wake up in the morning, you'll notice you have no thought. You're literally just, you've woken up. There's a moment, and for many people, it might only be a few seconds, but there's a recognition of just like a still observation. And then all of a sudden, thought will start. And thought is linking to all of these things that Donnie just described. Without thought, none of that other stuff can happen. If you have no thought, you have identity can't exist without thought either, because you have to think who you are. If you can't think who you are, well, then who are you, right? If you can't classify yourself with words, who are you? So there's this, yeah, it's a showing a small little gap moment of what a truth of what we really are. Now I'll give you another example. Oh, this is a different. I think I told this in Falling for Truth, but I'm not sure. But one morning, I was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I had to get up to go to the bathroom. I had to go to pee. So I didn't turn on, or I just turned a light on in the hallway. So when I went into that, this was like 25 or 30 years ago, and I was just doing the study, starting the study of reality. And you're in zombie mode. It's like I've just been sleeping. I'm making it to the bathroom and peeing, and I'm standing there, and there's a little bit of light, but not a lot. And then I noticed all of a sudden there was a UPC barcode just floating in above the toilet. And I'm like, what is that? Like peeing I lost interest in that whole thing there. Like, what the hell is this? What is floating like this? And the more I started asking questions about it, all of a sudden, like a bottle of cleaner literally formed around the now someone would say, well, you just something about how my observing was, or the ability of my sight. I mean, no, literally it created itself. It was like the UPC code was the only thing that was in existence, and my thought patterns couldn't reconcile a floating UPC barcode in this reality. So it literally manifested that bottle. And then, so I sat down after that, right? Because I had a lot of these kind of moments and then I would just take an hour, 2 hours and think, okay, is that happening to everything in my reality? Like literally, is the cup that I'm drinking right now, is that only existing because I literally manifested it into existence, because it would be impossible for me to explain how I could put tea from, hot water from no container into my mouth, that I've literally manifested a story. And that's what I began to wonder, am I just manifesting stories? Am I literally, this is the material realm, I'm just manifesting a story for continuous little end results. So yeah, I went through this kind of stuff for years trying to chew. I didn't necessarily get specific answers, but what it did do was make me much more observationally aware of everything that was going on in my environment all the time. I had for years hyper awareness, like hyper awareness for a change in the wind, a slight change in the breeze. I would notice. Like I was hyper aware to everything. And yeah.
Yeah, it's I mean, I think there's also a blessing in lack of awareness of certain things, be it, entities, shadow people,
Sure.
or these types of things. Because I mean, we've spoken before, I've had some of these experiences, not to the extent that you describe, but it also can lead you into a path of severe mental unwellness. So I think there actually is a balance and almost a grace or a blessing in a lack of consciousness about it. But yeah, I mean, I just see more and
Well, there is
more.
and there isn't. I mean, yeah, sure, there is for the average person, because like you say, if you cross a particular line from the standpoint of seeing reality and you're not ready to handle it, your mind can shatter, and that's not a good thing. That's why I talk so much about people needing to get their house in order. The house in order is your mind. You need to eventually get your mind into a place that's still calm, that's transformed all of its traumas. That's a good thing about the ego. The ego won't let you see emptiness if it's still broken and has trauma. You have to heal that. If you ever pushed yourself to the other edge, to the other side of it, the ego will shatter. So a lot of work which doesn't seem very spiritual, it seems really simple, like, hey, get off the cigarettes, get off the booze, get off the video games, get yourself in shape, eat a decent meal, make sure you've got a little bit of money coming in, make sure you're being nice to people when you're around, spend time with animals, start healing your trauma. It sounds really simplistic stuff, but what you're doing is you're building a vehicle that, should you really want to go deep on the path, can handle it. It's like you're walking into a gigantic furnace. And if you don't have yourself built to handle the heat, you're going to get burned. And that's really what a lot of very simplistic work is meant to do, which is get you ready to handle the really hard stuff down the road. It doesn't seem like fun. It doesn't seem like you're doing anything, but you are foundationally preparing yourself for where you're going to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree, and I think the I guess issues, for lack of a better phrase, with how your work is received is that I think there's way more nuance to it than what a lot of people take from it. And one example of that is, as I mentioned earlier, like I've had people reach out to me shaming me for having a child because I'm bringing another soul into the, harsh matrix. And, then other people say, this world is nothing but like awful, it's a hell realm with no redeeming qualities, and I can see those positions, but I just see those people actually being like in a very dark place in their lives, in terms of, like, if you're just seeing this world as a torturous hell realm without any like redeeming qualities, or I just see it as a dark place. Like, you can get to a dark place quickly with some of this material, as well, though.
Sure, they're not incorrect, but they're not incorrect. They're very correct in such a statement. The problem is that, like you say, it's then, well, what do you do with that? What do you do with such? How do you then navigate such an understanding within a reality of other suffering beings? And to me, that should then be an instant. The first thing that should come to mind is a Schopenhauer like philosophy. I have a whole appendix section in the book you haven't got to yet on Schopenhauer, which is basically just the realization of, if everything in this place is suffering, then how do I alleviate suffering for some other beings? So there's no problem to have that understanding. That's a very Cathar-like understanding. World is hell, and it doesn't matter. The good stuff is hell too. It's just less painful. It's you can kind of take a break when the nice stuff comes, but that doesn't mean it's helping you. It's another form of trap, right? Good or bad, naughty or nice, love or hate. It's all part of the trap. But we can learn to operate within this in a way that is trying to alleviate the suffering for someone or something else. That, I think, is a fairly decent way of going through. So there's no point trying to attack or shame someone else for anything you see going on around them with such understanding. In my opinion, it would then be, okay, what's something I could do that could say that makes their life a little bit easier today?
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean I have to change them or fix them or get them to believe anything. It's just, did the interaction with me, one way or another, make their day a little bit easier? Mm-hmm. That's a good way to go about day-to-day existence.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I think it's more, we can get trapped in that idea that this is simply a hell realm, and that they almost just stew in that without, hey, let's come together and try to figure this out. Let's try to escape. Let's try to end the suffering for ourselves and others. I just think, as we talked about earlier, in terms of how the matrix works, the endless layers, I also think within there's many trappings in trying to escape as well, right? Just because you're one step higher on the mountain and you have a larger view, or you have more knowledge. Knowledge doesn't confer, you talk about in your book actually that people think they're special because they have knowledge, and that's one of the many trappings of the ego actually, is that we think we're special because we have special knowledge, and I actually think too much knowledge without applying it in a spiritual sense, or whatever you want to call it, can actually be a trap.
It's just the idea of needing to escape is a trap right away because it hasn't answered the fundamental question: who is trapped? Who or what is trapped? Like when soon as someone says, "I'm exiting," it's a hell realm and I'm exiting the matrix. Okay, good intention, but what is exiting? What do you mean? Well, define exactly what it is that is trapped. And they might throw another name at me. They might give me a name. They might throw a word: soul, divine spark, whatever. All right, what is that? What do you mean? Define it, like completely, totally, and completely, in absolute detail. What is it? Well, I don't know. Well, if you don't know, then you don't really know what the trap is then, and you don't really know technically if what you're doing is getting out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, I'm on a pathway to doing that. I'm on a pathway to, but that's why you can't reach the finish line without self-definition of knowing who and what you are. It's a foundation core of Asian traditions, even though the Asian traditions mostly today have turned that into another religious organization in a way to make a whole lot of money for themselves. But at their core is like the original teaching, which is the original teaching of Christianity. It's the original teaching of Islam. It's the original teaching of Buddhism. It doesn't matter where you go, right? Whatever tradition, it's there, which is you've got to define that which you really are. You've got to find whatever is true about you, because the more you look at what you know about yourself, one way or another, it's turned out to be false. Because one thing about truth, when you start to get close to it, you realize truth is unchanging. Truth is unchanging. It's still from the standpoint of it doesn't need to be in movement, and it doesn't change. So as soon as you find something that changes, you know that can't be truth, because truth doesn't change. As soon as you find something in movement, that can't be truth, because truth is still. So that's a huge part of the work. So that's why I say it's a two strong path. And I had an illness for 10 years, right? Yeah, I talked to you about this. I had an illness after I had my Death Canyon realization experience in 2005. I went through like a 10-year illness, and the illness didn't really get solved until a few years ago, because I got both realizations at the same time within 2 weeks of each other. The one of here's nothingness, here's the totality of the understanding of no self, and here's boom, the story of the matrix and the story of the trap. And the problem, when you look at those things, they are complete opposites of each other. Those teachings are complete opposites. And natural human thinking is black and white. Only one of them can be true. One of them must be true. One of them must be false. And I would keep going back and forth, deciding, oh, it's this one. This is the side that's true. No, this is the side that's true. And what I was really doing was literally tearing myself up inside, because the deepest self is trying to get me to say they're both true. Both sides are actually true. They're bizarrely two opposites of the same coin. And you need to, and once I'm finally able to accept that both of them are true, it's one of the greatest. There's two great relaxation points in my life. That was one of them. I'll tell you the other one in a second, but that was the relaxation point. So why I'm saying that is because it's related to what you're talking about. Somebody can be really strong and knowledgeable on one of those two sides, right? Like if I go talk to some Advaita teacher or Zen or Buddhist teacher, we could have a conversation about emptiness in incredible detail. But as soon as I bring up the matrix, soul trap, no, that's wrong. You're crazy. No, it can't be. And if I talk about to someone who's really digging into soul trap, matrix, the nature of reality, conspiracy theory, and say, well, actually, it doesn't exist. It's emptiness. No, no. And so
Yeah.
you can see that even the two sides, even when you get really good on knowledgeable on one of the sides, it's still half of the journey. That's the one thing that helped me relax in my life tremendously. The other was the realization that the reality that we exist in is built to be insane, right? It's built to be a suffering trap. It has nice things in it. It has beautiful things in it. It has enjoyable elements to it. It has things that I can appreciate at times when I experience them, but it's still built to be insane. And once I realized that, oh, that's right. So I can't fix it. I can't change it. I can't turn it into something else. It's doing exactly what it was supposed to do. So stop trying to fix it. Instead, work on complete sanity within an insane reality. That's something I have the ability to work on. It's just my own sanity. Once I stop trying to fix the world, stop trying to save the world, all of a sudden I had all of this energy and all of this available inner calmness. Because again, that's what the matrix wants you to do. The matrix wants you to come, look, it's insane. So come fix it. And then someone will spend 10 years and then they're literally burnt out to the max. Maybe spend a couple of years in some long hospital stay and they barely get themselves on their feet 5 or 6 years later and say, I'm just going to run a coffee shop from now on because that was just. And I think everyone has to kind of go through it one way or another. When you see the insanity the first time, there's always a natural human tendency. How can I fix it? How can I make it better? And when you realize, oh, you just have to make it better here in this particular spot, this
Yeah.
particular awareness, things get easier.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of things that I struggle with in my own. I'm in Canada here, right? And needless to say, a
Mm.
lot of drama and politics are happening right now with people in the freedom movements either wanting to become the United States or here in Alberta becoming their own sovereign state. And you just see how much Canada has fallen from its perceived past grace. And you see, we could be so wealthy, but we're not because of poor leadership. And you want to do something like I really struggle with it because it
Sure.
we should all be way more wealthy than we are. And you want to get involved because there's just such apathy, but then at the same time you just see the layers of, as you said, insanity, not just here but globally. And yeah, you really wonder. I've asked people in the truth movement and the freedom movements in Canada, show me one politician who's ever made it better substantially, right? They have kind of they
Mm.
get bright eyed about the past, but even then, at the time, it was a new low, and it seems like there is this kind of baked in to the insanity is also that things are always getting a little bit worse every day.
Yeah,
Right?
always. It's nothing is improving ever. Um, from that, there's two things. There's one more in the matrix answer, one out of the matrix answer. The first is, in theory, this is the frustrating part though. In theory, the matrix could be changed. Theoretically. I mean, it's just code. It theoretically, this reality could be completely different. But for that to happen realistically, every single, what would we call it, system that exists in the world has to be torn down completely. Government, education, medicine, law, police, commerce, it doesn't matter. If there's a system, it has to be burned to the ground and everything has to start from scratch. All of the people you talk to, for example, they're all looking for a way to fix something by changing who's ever in charge. Oh, if we just put these people in charge, if we just put this person in, oh, if we just alter this little bit here, that can't work because the system was built by the C systems were built by AI, right? By AI beyond anything you've ever seen in the material realm. This is like AI at the core of the matrix built all this stuff. And as long as it's functioning, the matrix is running the show. So that's one pot. That's that. So literally, you got to burn it all down. Now, within the matrix, the other way that you could have that possibility is if like some worldwide EMP event went off and literally every piece of technology all over the world was destroyed instantaneously. No more computers, no more washing machines, no more cars, no more, no more handguns, no more telephone, nothing. It's all gone. The whole world who survives it is back to axes, chopping wood, uh, you know, collecting berries, sewing your own clothes. Literally, systems no longer exist. All that matters is small groups of community working together to foster a type of survival and a type of very close kinship and friendship. If that happened on a worldwide scale, for a while, you might get an okay system. But like you say, give the AI time, it'll come back. But that would at least give a break. So that's one side of the answer. The other side of it, though, is some might say, well, why do you pay any attention to reality at all? Like, yeah, I listen to the news. I listen to various different news outlets. I like to, and I hear what's going on. What's going on in this part of the world, that part of the world. Like, why? Well, the only reason I get into it is because I think of it this way: if a tornado is going to be coming, I'd like to know about it. It's good to kind of know, like, hey, tornado's going through your city tomorrow. You might want to prepare for that. Yeah, that would be a good idea to be one day ahead of the preparation for the tornado. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to try to figure out how to stop the tornado. I'm going to go out and meet the tornado and talk to it. I'm going to try to dig a hole in the ground and reroute the tornado. Okay, tornado's coming. What do I need to do to stay in a sane, calm, energetic place when the tornado hits? I think if someone is doing the same thing with the way reality is going through, um, you're allowing yourself to move through the reality fairly well. One more thing before I get off the subject and then let you go next is that, but if someone feels compelled, like there's some people that are compelled to try to change the government, try to change the system, I don't tell them, I would never tell them don't, because I don't know your life path. I don't know any particular individual's life path. What is the life path of those 10,000 that gives them the opportunity to leave the matrix? That might be it. Like literally going into something that I would say, well, would you do it? No, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it if that's your deepest conviction. And that is where it's like your energy is being like just pushing you to doing something, then you should do it. Because you'll find out later in a year or two why. Maybe it was a good thing, maybe it wasn't, but you got to do it first. So I'm presenting things after 30 or 40 years of working with a lot of really lucky people that I happened to come across in the course of my life who opened a lot of doorways for me and what they did. But that doesn't mean I would ever say to somebody else, here's like Mr. Park never once told me what I should do with my life. I asked him once. This is the Korean monk I spent a year with. And I asked him once, straight out, the dumbest question you can ever ask a spiritual teacher. I asked him, what should I do with my life? And my friend was sitting with me at the table. And he responded with a long story. He started with an old man's hips, and then he talked about Korean restaurants. Then he talked about French women. Then he talked about changing the tire on a car. And then I talked about one other thing, and then he just went to his room and went to sleep. And my friend turned to me and just said, did you get all that? What do you mean? He told you your entire life. Like he literally told every single thing about you and what you were going to do. Like what? He's talking about Korean restaurants. He wasn't talking about Korean restaurants. He was talking about you. And so that was interesting. Even when they do share your life, it's even still veiled and, they never come out and tell you anything directly. It's all stuff you've got to figure out for yourself. And things you have to figure out for yourself, sometimes you've got to go through it and try it out and find out if that was the right choice or not.
Yeah, and I found one of the key things for my growth, my personal growth, was depolarization. We're always forced into these binaries of left, right, good, evil, Democrat, Republican, Christian, Gnostic, and it just seems like a large part of the Matrix trap as well. I get a lot of beauty and truth and guidance from the Christian faith, even though, being. I've also seen the abuse, a lot of abuse within the communities and like mind trappings. As you had mentioned, the truth seems to be fragmented and scattered in all directions and in all places, and that we have to be open to the truth because no one person or belief system has the truth, right? They have these little fragments. It almost seems like the truth, part of the simulacrum, if you will, has been you take the whole truth, you divide it into fragments, and you scatter it all around the wind. And that's part of the trick too, that we're looking outside of ourselves for the endless rabbit holes, and if you burrow for 10 years, you might get a little nugget, but it's almost impossible to get the whole truth of the nature of reality externally. So we have to
Externally,
go
right.
within, right?
Yeah. Internally, there's only truth is truth.
Yeah.
Right. The eventual, if you find truth, true truth, it'll be the same as what anyone else who truly found it found. There's no different from what, if you find it, it'll be no different than what Buddha or Jesus or Mary of the Cross, or no, not Mary of the Cross. What's her name? Yeah, Mary of the Cross? No. Saints. Can't think of her name. Saint Catherine of the Cross, right?
Okay.
It's all the same truth. But the pathway there will be completely different. I just want to read you something. Just give me 12 seconds while I go get this.
Yeah.
And that was what you were talking about. You called it the depolarization. So I'm reading a small bit of the Faith Mind Sutra, one of my favorite Asian texts. It's 4 pages long and is packed with unbelievable detail. And a few lines, simplified. If you wish to know truth, hold no opinions. Mm-hmm. To judge and choose is the disease of the mind. When truth goes unobserved, the mind rolls with self-centered striving. No good can come of this. Tao is immaculate, empty. It lacks nothing, is nothing. When you impose stillness to stop activity, stillness becomes an activity. When you prefer one thing to another, you cannot abide in one. Not abiding in one, you are bound by both action and stillness. It's just a little piece of what Donnie was saying, this idea that as soon as you get pulled on the grandfather clock, one way or another, you're in the matrix. It doesn't matter which, the matrix doesn't care if you choose left or right. You're in. Mm-hmm. The matrix doesn't like when you stay in the still point between any polarity. When you're in that still point, that means you're just in observer mode. And when you're just in observer mode, when you're just in an awareness mode, the matrix is having a very difficult time generating the emotion that it needs. If you watch very carefully, I'm not saying emotions are bad. Some people hear this stuff, and I've had these things on my locals channel where people went into these discussions about how bad emotions are. They're not bad. Emotions are just the way the human character gets information about its environment. There's nothing wrong with when you're hungry. It means you need some food and you eat. There's value to anger or fear or happiness or whatever, but it's when one identifies with it for longer than the moment that it's required, that's when you start sucking yourself in. And the more you can stay in a still point, the more any emotion, which is really how you get generally pulled to one of these two polarities, it's through an emotion. When you can be in a still point and the emotion can just come, you can acknowledge it, you can recognize it, you can potentially do something if it's needed, but then you just let it fall away. It doesn't grab you. That's how you keep the polarization very light. It's that allowing the emotion to come, do its thing, and dissolve, not like the way it normally does. It comes up, boom, and it's going to stay here for hours or days or weeks. That's how the dream plays with us, and that's how the external reality is manipulating us constantly. Right? All advertising is doing. If an advertisement really works, it's just generating a particular emotion. It's generating some kind of emotion between the product or whatever it's selling and you having it or you not having it. And all it's doing is generating this emotion that my life will somehow be better if I get the red car, go on this cruise, buy this lipstick, buy whatever, right? That's all it's doing. It's selling, and it's not selling a product, it's implanting an emotion that you will be doing better if you have their product. All of realities work in the same way.
Yeah, to me, I've been doing a lot of soul searching, and I think literally, I call this the Spellbreakers podcast, right? We're breaking spells. You're one of the chief spell breakers in my opinion, but ultimately, I think every spell is just a mind, like an egregore, where you think something outside of yourself will solve a problem that you believe you have, and there's endless, infinite permutations of that, but that is in its essence the nature of spelling.
Yeah, and spelling right away indicates it needs words. You can't have a spell without words. So, which link to thoughts. So you're right back to this whole examination of, well, what is thought? Where does it come from? You say it's my thought, but where does it come from? Can you stop thinking instantaneously? Can you start it? Can you have control over your thought? Most will say no. You actually don't have real control over your thought. You can manage it. You can manage thought. And so if we start realizing that, wait a minute, thought is not actually mine. Like thought is not actually coming from me. It's almost like it's being beamed in like on a radio broadcast. Ah, now I can understand what that is. It's thought is part of the matrix. It's not part of me. It's only part of me if I identify with it, and then I'm identifying with the matrix. If I recognize the thought is just some sort of external radio broadcast, some of which could be useful, like, hey, you're supposed to have this conversation with Donnie today at 7 o'clock. Oh yeah, that's right. I do have that. I have to remember to have that. Some thoughts from the matrix have some sort of purpose, but probably 90% of them don't. And that's where we have to really do a great job of, it's not just thought. So when you see thought as like literally, I have a friend in this pathway. She's another teacher, Amara Strand. She put it in terms like this. She has a metaphor that you have a radio antenna at the top of your head. And that radio antenna is constantly picking up thoughts. That literally the matrix is beaming you thoughts. Some thoughts are personal, some thoughts are for everybody. Like during our 2020 to 2024 period or whatever that was, during our wonderful medical time, that was one gigantic thought projection that was being constantly sent out to everybody. Now, what she said is you can learn, though, how to bring that antenna deeper and deeper into your head. So there's less and less and less of it available, means you're going to impact less and less and less of these radio-like thoughts. And if you can begin metaphorically or like symbolically to yourself, feeling like you're literally dropping that into your head and that you don't have the antenna there anymore. She said, if you start getting good at that, you'll start noticing you have very few thoughts. And at first I thought, it sounds pretty simplistic, but I tried it. Yeah, it just thoughts were just started stopping as soon as I did that. And I was like, holy crap. So just the examination of thought, what it is and where it comes from, is a very important part of the process. It's another thing people generally don't do. But the great news is everybody can do it. Like, you don't need to be super healthy. You don't need to take a yoga class. You don't need money. You literally just need to stop for 20 minutes and watch your thoughts. What's going on? Write them down.
Yeah.
What am I thinking? Literally, that's a big part of the path. Everybody can do it. Nobody does.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. And for me, um, I call it like radical acceptance, where one of the main characteristics of the ego is it's almost like a perpetual itch that you can't scratch. Like in every moment, there's just
Mm.
like one little thing off. Like if only I had a little. I kind of have to pee right now, but I don't want to. Or like I ran out of that mint tea, so I'm having lavender. Or like if only this person was here. If only right. We there's always like this mild discontent at all times, which seems to be
Right.
like a central core part of the matrix system. Back to
Sure.
the good place, which we should speak about more, but that idea of like this kind of subtle background discontent at all times. So practice flipping that on its head is like literally, and it's easier said than done, of course, but you just practice radical acceptance. Like everything that is, every thought, okay, like you don't resist it. You're just like, oh, that thought is there. Okay. There's nothing wrong, just is. Just
Well,
accepting it.
I wouldn't necessarily recommend that because some thoughts, if you watch them carefully, you'll realize are coming from demonic entities. And you definitely do not want to be accepting those. And so that's a really important part is realizing what thoughts are like kind of part of the body, what thoughts are just randomly sort of being projected out by the matrix as a whole. Like say if you're in Canada, you're supposed to like please like Carney or whatever. This message will just go out constantly, right? And then there's these thoughts that are teetering on insanity,
Yeah.
teetering on things that are crazy. And when you realize that they're coming from a source that is literally stealing your energy, that's where you can start getting the inner power to start, in a sense, saying, I'm not getting on that horse.
Yeah.
I'm recognizing the other ones that are kind of goofy or whatever. Okay, I can see it. I'm not following it. But then there's certain ones that you want to be able, you need to starve them out. One of the ways you get rid of the hooks of these energy grabbers is you starve them out of your mind
Yeah.
because they often require action. Like let's say, uh, we'll just use a simple one. Back in the days when I was drinking, so there's no question that an entity. I didn't drink until I had a thought in my head. I should go out and have a few drinks, right? If I didn't have that thought, if instead, oh, I think I'll just read a book, I think I'll go for a walk, if anything that had something to do without drinking, well, I wouldn't have drank.
Yeah.
So the drinking, which would be giving the energy to this entity, needed me first to have the thought, whatever it was going to be, I should go out and have a few drinks.
Yeah.
So as soon as you learn how to churn out that particular thought and literally starve it out, the behavior part can't occur. So there's that part of it in the examination of, do certain thoughts lead me from the character, the thing I'm playing, into places I don't like where I go. Then that's where it's actually worked from. It's worked from starving out the thought by, again, seeing it,
Yeah.
but actually just saying, yeah, I know you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know the game you're playing. Not a game I'm interested in playing, so I'll just stare at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then they'll try again, then they'll try again, and eventually, if you do that long enough, they're just gone.
Yeah. 100%. And um, yeah, I think I should have maybe been a bit more precise with what I mean by accept. It means, I
I
mean,
know. I just
like,
wanted to, I just wanted to clarify because I've learned the conversation really isn't between me and you.
yeah.
I'm having a conversation with, in this case, 10 or 20,000 people that I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I always have to think very carefully when I hear something, how are 10,000 people potentially responding to that? So it's challenging because if you and I were having a conversation just together with no cameras, it would be totally different than how I have to have a conversation knowing I'm talking to a whole lot of people.
Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. It just, I find it very interesting that you really can like I've had Jerry Marzinski on here a few times, right? And
Mm.
he
Yep.
he he.
Mhm.
He's under the impression that kind of 80% of the thoughts that we have are not ours and they come from demons. And if you observe that, you can kind of see that and starve it out.
Mhm.
And I think I think he's on to something, definitely. Yeah, I wanted to maybe dig into this concept of entities that we've seen. I've had shadow being experiences, all of these things. I'm sure you have as well. Yeah, what is your view on kind of the demonic and entities? Like, do you think they're
Yeah, I don't
thought
like
forms that
going
we're
in. I don't
creating,
like
or
talking into too much detail about it, just because it's a very private conversation with individuals. This is one of these ones you kind of have privately with a person. Um, it's more that the simple answer is just to recognize that there are lots of things. There are lots of we'll just call them things that exist in a non-physical reality, in a non-physical realm, who get their food from us. And it's not always negative stuff that they're getting their food from. There are very nice entities who are eating really nice, happy energy. So that's why it's a very complex subject. And it's just it's just to recognize that this is part of the realm, that this is a hierarchical eating structure, and we're not the top of the food chain like we've been taught. There are the food chain continues, and when we understand that, we can start watching that and start noticing, do I do certain actions or thoughts or things and then I get tired afterwards? That's usually a clue that, because you shouldn't just perform a regular action that doesn't take a lot of energy, like it's just a regular action. You shouldn't feel tired when you're done. So if you feel tired, worn out, then you have to wonder, is something sucking energy from this particular action? And then so there's that, then you can examine it. You try the action for 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 times, and you watch your response to it and see what's going on. It's all a giant process of examination without making it fearful.
Mhm.
You're taking back some of your power no matter what, because you're saying, it's linked to me, right? It's linked to what I'm doing or what I'm thinking. And so we have the ability to, maybe not in every case completely chop the thing off instantaneously, but we can weaken the force, so we retain more and more of our power by just having more and more control over how we do things and how we think.
Mhm.
Simple. Sorry, it's a very complex question. This isn't the forum to go into that
I
detail.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I really like that your use of the Good Place TV show. And as an aside, my wife kept telling me when I was describing different things, she's like, "It's like the Good Place." I'm like, "What's the Good Place?" She's like, "It's this TV show you got to watch." I resisted it for a while because I felt in my heart that it was true. And then when I watched the show, I haven't finished it, just to be clear, but I watched like maybe a season and a half too. And howdy, it was scary to me because it felt so real. Um, that it was almost like the archons had written the script themselves or something, So yeah, I'd be curious. Did you have that experience with the show, and walk us through, you know, to what extent do you think that show is unadulterated truth versus you're using it as an example to describe what you've come to realize?
Uh, it's a metaphor that's on the right path to the complexity of this realm. That's why I wrote a whole chapter on the second chapter is just about comparing the good place to our reality. It's if you treat it as a myth, as one big myth, it's a really useful myth for explaining our reality,
Yeah.
which is, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it's four humans apparently dying, going to heaven, and being believed that they have been gone into the perfect heavenly realm where everything will be looked after for the rest of their lives, but things keep going wrong. Problems keep occurring, difficulties start to happen, and it just continues again and again without destroying the whole show for anyone who wants to see it. But I realized, oh, that's our realm. That this town, which was four humans and say 400, in this case, demonic beings, whose only job was to try to trick the humans, fool the humans. And what was so interesting about the good place, why I thought it was such a useful explanation of our realm, they weren't causing physical harm to the characters. Like they weren't, uh, blowing something up, blowing a character up, shooting them in the leg. It was all subtle. It was all psychological tricks. It was all things done to attack their moods and their feelings and get them to continue the battle with each other when the demonic beings weren't there. And I thought that's that's what I toned down the realm when I was talking about realm of suffering, because when if you say a realm of suffering only, if that's how it's described, earthquakes, deaths, cancers, run over in a car, shot in the back, like you're looking at all of these things, right? Pains, traumas. When you start to realize that actually this realm builds the greatest amount of suffering into small psychological little attacks,
Mm-hmm.
and that it actually builds it in such a way so that we can do it to each other.
Yeah.
That that we don't need the system to psychologically attack us. The system maneuvers certain experiences and certain people together that it knows
Mm-hmm.
will literally create more conflict with each other. And as soon as people come together that look like these would have a really smooth working relationship, the Matrix does something to split those people up so they can't spend much time together. The Good Place, the first season was outstanding in how it described it. Unfortunately, as the season, by the time it hits season 3, I guess you're not there yet. It starts to get very, very difficult to watch. And by the fourth season, the writing has become very, very poor.
Okay.
It's very, very difficult. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to get through. But you've read my where it's going at the end, and that the trick. There's as much of a trick being played on the audience in The Good Place as there is on the characters in the show.
Mm-hmm.
The audience is being presented that these demonic beings can actually become good, that they can change, they can grow, they can decide to help people, they can create this whole thing and help the humans get to heaven. And when you realize it's been one gigantic trick from the second the show started to the second the show ended, there has been nothing ever in the show being done for the help of the humans. Even the end of the show is just getting the characters to walk into the white light. Well, we know what that means. They have walked into the reincarnation cycle willingly. They were not, none of the characters were forced into it. Each of the characters walked into the white light on their own free will, by their own choice. They reincarnated. It's like the show was one gigantic trick, and it was like you say. I don't think the writers of the show themselves thought, "Hey, we figured out the nature of reality, and we're going to write the nature of reality." Something farther, deeper, way back there in the universe wanted this information presented for whatever reason. I don't know. It happens sometimes. And they worked through this thing, positive or negative, I don't know, but they put it forth through the writers. There's just, I don't know. I mean, we don't get that much anymore. There was a time period in our history, 1998 to 2000, 2001. There was movies just came out all of a sudden. The Matrix, Dark City, Truman Show, Donnie Darko, Extenzes. I mean, there's like about 8 or 10 of them, all about the nature of reality, all about the tricks of reality, and they all came out within like a 2 or 3 year period. And
Yeah.
it's like, why? What's trying to tell us something? And we've never had an explosion like that of entertainment like information come out since then. But The Good Place is one of the few ones that I think came out with an actual, that 1899 show that had a little bit in it. Of course, Westworld has some stuff in it, and but as an actual, if you could take as a metaphor, if you could, I think, blend Westworld and The Good
Yeah.
Place together, I think you actually get a pretty good understanding of how the Matrix works.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I yeah, Dark City's actually my favorite movie, and the first time I watched that, it was just this visceral, deep in my soul truth of what's going on and how they were memory wiping and it was experimental. Yeah, and I felt very similar to the I couldn't keep watching it, The Good Place, because I was like, oh, it's too much truth. I can't handle it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I found it really good. But I want to get into this concept of the divine spark, which you speak about in the book quite a bit, as well the concept of NPCs as a counter to that, and going back to The Good Place, right? That there's hundreds of people in The Good Place, but it really is only four. So um, you're kind of alluding to that, I guess, in the book as well. That most of the people in our reality, for lack of a better phrase, NPCs that are there to just kind of throw us off balance. So yeah, maybe you could just get into that concept of the divine spark and how that would, I guess, contrast with, you know, I think you don't say that anybody was without spark, but it's more dim, or yeah, maybe we could just get into that, your perception of the concept of the divine spark.
This is probably a good last question to wrap up, or because I always hit about an hour and a half, and that's when my mind starts to turn off.
Sure,
So
sure.
so I'll answer this last one, and then we'll call this one an experience. Um, with the divine spark is a word that comes out of Gnostic literature. It's not actually in the Nag Hammadi fragments. If somebody reads any of the Nag Hammadi documents, the word divine spark doesn't exist in the language. But it's the idea of it is there. It kind of begins to come as a term um, quite a bit later, and begins to build in, again, I don't necessarily trust history, but from the standard history we're given, like the 800 to 900 range, you start getting this idea of a divine spark, which is in the word itself, it tells you some interesting things. It says what is divine, divine meaning perfect, spark meaning fire. It's linked to fire. And my book the Empty the Cave has a gigantic combination of this discussion between water and fire. And I bring it up 4 or 5 different places in the book. Water constantly being a symbolism for the Matrix. Even in the Matrix movie, the Matrix was symbolized through water. Narcissus, when he looks at himself in the water and stares at his own projection, that's an example of what's going on here. We're dealing with a reflected Matrix projection principle, water. But fire is a force of symbolically that which is outside the Matrix and was brought in, either tempted in, tricked in, coming in willingly, and then unable to get out, which was divided. I don't see thousands of divine sparks that came in. I see one celestial fire that came in. That was splintered then into tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of these divine sparks, who then manifested into various bodies and into the experience deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's not Donnie or Howdie Mickoski that has to wake up. We're just a character we're a character in a video game. It's the divine spark that has to wake up. And that divine spark is symbolized by Sleeping Beauty. The divine spark, that which splintered into the dream, is the feminine half. The male half is still, you might say, at the door of the Matrix. And that divine searching that all of us feel, which we usually feel for this search to be whole, we turn it into I, as a male, need to find a female that I need to connect with. What's really happening is the recognition of the feminine part of myself, which is Sleeping Beauty, needs to get out of its coma, needs to awaken from its coma, and needs to reunite with the other half of that spark, which is at the doorway, and start reuniting to the celestial fire. This metaphor is very powerful because you'll find it when you understand that metaphor, what the metaphor is doing, it changes everything. So I'll leave you with this little idea. So let's take the Jesus story of walking on water. Everyone normally takes that story to mean something of why he's godlike or why he's special. But what if the metaphor just means he's walking on water, meaning he's walking on the matrix, which means he is completely in fire, therefore cannot sink into the matrix. That's what it's telling you. It's telling you that, but when you are completely in your fire, you can't sink into the matrix. Because the Cathars were very clear. They refused all water baptism, claiming that baptism of water is, we would call it, part of the matrix. They only accepted baptism of fire, which they considered the baptism of Christ, which was the Pentecost, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only thing they considered true. And if you split it in those lines, water baptism equals sinking into the matrix, fire baptism equals rising above the matrix and walking on it. It's a very deep symbolic idea, but when we begin to recognize that it's the thing back there that wakes up, awakening becomes an unbelievably selfless journey, because this Howdie Mickoski thing has been living 50 plus years in this life, actually not for Howdie Mickoski's benefit. Howdie Mickoski has been living for Sleeping Beauty, for the divine spark to get out of its coma, regain its power. As it regains its power, it's nice. It lets the Howdie thing have a little bit better life. But it's really all about that spark, the awareness, the true thing of what's really here, not this awareness, that awareness can go back to its home. That's kind of what the book is sort of pointing towards. That's kind of what these are some of the metaphors that Empty the Cave is trying to get towards. And that what are the things that need to be done for the divine spark, for Sleeping Beauty to wake up, right? And Sleeping Beauty needs to wake up by having a prince come to the castle that gets her to open her eyes and awaken. But she doesn't want to wake up for any jackass prince. She wants to wake up for a prince with integrity and honesty and courage and clarity and a whole lot of other things. And that's the transformation that's going on with our form. Doesn't matter whether it's male or female, the form that you're existing in. You're creating yourself. You're transforming yourself into the kind of prince Sleeping Beauty wants to wake up for. That's what we're doing. That's why we're not improving ourselves to feel better or be happier or live a nicer life. We're transforming ourselves in such a way that eventually Sleeping Beauty will say, I'm getting up for that guy or that girl. That's willing for me to get out of the coma. And that's a lot of the work we're doing. That's one part of it, which is reconnecting then to the divine spark. And as we go about that, that's one side of it. The other side is seeing the matrix. And the third side is having the realization of emptiness, which is this view from beyond the fictional self, from the awareness of what you are, which is, so when people hear the word emptiness, they usually get concerned. It sounds fearful. Well, it's nothing. It is, yes. It's also everything. They're two sides of the same coin. Again, it's emptiness is everything and emptiness is nothing, depending on which way it's being looked at. Just most people like the empty full side, so you don't need to talk about that too much. Got to talk more about the nothing side, because that's the side that everyone feels like, well, I don't really want that side of it. Can I just have the everything side? No, you need both if you're going to have full realization of emptiness. these are the pathways to start moving one to potentially moving out of the matrix. And again, I don't consider any of this stuff I talk about pessimistic. I don't consider any of it negative. I don't consider any of it dark. It's just seeing things honestly and being able to say, I don't need, I'm gonna suspend my totality of what I've been told to believe and think my whole life. That society has given me a ton of stuff I'm supposed to believe. Mom and dad have given me a ton of stuff I'm supposed to believe. You know what? Most of what they've told I found out is wrong. So, how much other stuff am I holding on to that just might be wrong too? So, I'm willing to just let it all go for a while, open my doorways of exploration, see where that takes me, because at the very worst, you can always come back to all of your old beliefs and all of your old ideas. They didn't go anywhere. They're still potentially there. You can pick them up anytime you want, but it can be good to put them down for a while and just see, well, what happens when you open your doorway to possibility, even if those possibilities seem a bit dark or dangerous on the surface. But what's on the other side of it? Like, you know, all of these great teachers of history, they were all willing to walk into emptiness. They seem to do okay. So maybe it's not as scary as we think.
It's a perfect place to leave it. Guys, please go buy Howdie's new book, Empty the Cave, Awaken the Spark. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Adelbris, or as well, the link below, howdiemickoski.com. You can buy the ebook directly. Please support him. Howard, you want to thank you so much for jumping on. Is there any other any plugs anywhere else you want to recommend people find you, support you?
No, I mean, of course, as an author, we always like that if someone finds we have something interesting to say, then it's great to pick up a book and, like you say, even the PDF. I like to make the PDFs available so that it doesn't cost much for people to get a hold of the material. Um, and because it is there's something you mentioned earlier in the podcast, which was um, you hear someone speak for 40 or 50 minutes and you think you have a pretty good idea of them or their message or their thesis, and you really don't, at least until you read their book. Like, really hearing someone speak should only give you enough interest to, like, do I want to go further and actually read this person's book and see what, because in a book you have time to craft your ideas, craft your presentation, place it in a step-by-step format that you kind of don't get to do in conversation. So
Mm-hmm.
for me, and not just with me, if there's anybody that you hear that has some interesting stuff that you think is you'd like to go further, and if they have a book, that's definitely the place you go to really learn, okay, what does this person really say and what does this person really present. Beyond that, it's like always, don't believe everything I say. I'm just here to offer you an opportunity to think, and it's your pathway, and you have to walk whatever it is your own way. So I just walked it mine.
That's great. Well, yeah, we want to thank Howdie again, guys. Please go support him, buy his book. It's very, very interesting. As well, if you guys want to support this podcast, the link's on the screen. Buymeacoffee.com/the Spellbreakers podcast. Thank you, fellow Spellbreakers, and good afternoon, good evening, and good night.